Hello and welcome to an ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is a news update for the 1st of February 2023. I'll be doing my frontline update shortly afterwards. Where should we start? Well, let's go to our usual figures for the Ukrainian reporting of Russian losses from the day before. All the usual caveats, accuracy, propaganda, and Russia don't really produce similar figures. The sort of main headline here is 920 liquidated personnel. That is a very bad day for Russian troops. Over 900 is way above average. In fact, I think that's near like one of the highest figures that has been recorded. So obviously yesterday was a bad day, probably in the Vuhledar area. Also, you've got the meat grinder that is Bakhmut. 8 tanks lost, fairly high. 4 APCs, 10 pieces of artillery, and 4 MLRS. That's pretty high. There was a report yesterday from, I think it was Constantine. In fact, I'll go and find that. Yeah, so this is, I believe, a Ukrainian saying, "I have good news for you. 3 Russian SPGs, 2 S3 or 2 S1, where the gimbal zoom was broken, were destroyed today by the artillery battery my friend commands using only 4 rounds. I think this was the most successful strike I've seen with a 75 success rate from a friend." Uh, Incredible. So four rounds used, taking out 3 SPGs. And then when you go back here and see, right, 10 artillery systems taken out, well, 3 of them by 1 crew. 4 MLRS, if that is indeed true. So that's a bad day for the Russians in terms of artillery systems and multiple launch rocket systems. 13 vehicles and fuel tanks. So I guess so across the board, but liquidated personnel definitely a bad day there for the Russians. Okay, moving on to news bits. NATO countries should stop drawing lines and supply Ukraine with any weapons it needs, says the Lithuanian president Gitanas Nausėda. But on the other hand, Hungary and Austria will not send weapons to Ukraine to prevent further escalation. Obviously, Hungary, you got Viktor Orban. In fact, the new corruption, I already spoke to you about Ukraine doing a little bit better. The Corruption Perceptions Index, CPI, has come out. Hungary is the bottom of Europe. It's perceived as the most corrupt place. It's dropped to 12 points since 2014 or 2012 when Orban came into power. So there's a real correlation with Orban and corruption. And it's as simple as that. And he has changed a lot of the stuff to keep himself in power and taken away lots of transparency in Hungary. It's pretty, it's a real shame. So that, but Austria have also just not been sending any military assistance, as far as I can work out. In fact, there's in Belgium a private company that buys up lots of old pieces of kit, and they've got something like 38 Gepards that I think they might be able to offload to Ukraine. They've certainly got some Leopard ones that they're looking to sell, but they need to get them, up. Get them in good working order with good spec. But there's also some, I believe, Austrian light tanks, and Austria won't let them be sold on. So Austria being a little bit difficult, it seems. Corresponding if there's any Austrians in the threads below, please let us know what your thoughts are. Corresponding statements were made by the defense ministers of the countries. Hungary said that they will provide humanitarian aid to refugees, being on the side of peace. So they say, and that's that. The new Czech president, Ukraine, says Ukraine should be let into NATO as soon as the war is over. There is some speculation that the application or the accession to the EU might have been a little bit rushed so far, and that people's expectations are maybe unrealistic. Some diplomats within the EU are saying, actually, we need to hold on a little here. I don't think Ukraine are going to be joining in the immediate future, even though their hopes are really high. But this is a new Czech president who used to be the deputy, number 2 in NATO, saying that as soon as this war is over, they should be in NATO. In the BBC broadcast interview, former NATO General Petr Pavel also said that the Western nations should have almost no limits to what they should send to equip the Ukrainian military, which is set to receive dozens of advanced Western tanks in the coming months. And this then plays back into what the Lithuanian president was saying, which is, give them everything they need well, it's good to see that there's a little bit of joined up writing there between the Czech president and the Lithuanians. Reznikov, who's the defense minister for Ukraine, went to France to discuss the transfer of fighter jets. While the US is not ready to make such a step yet, other allied countries appear to be more willing. So Biden has famously said no. But then on the flip side, Biden's refusal to send F 16s to Ukraine has been granted with skepticism at the Pentagon, where some officials citing the administration's pattern of reversal after rejecting other pleas from Kyiv foresee scenarios where they could be provided. It's not that strong. This is just some people saying, yeah, we can see them being provided in the end. Yeah, one senior defense official, this is a Washington Post, who, like some others interviewed for this report, spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss internal deliberations, said that while the Pentagon's calculus was unlikely to shift soon, there remains a possibility that the discussion could be M1'd, a reference to Biden's recent commitment of M1 Abrams tanks after administration officials suggested for months that the sophisticated arms would be too complex for Ukraine to maintain. Another senior defense official acknowledged that there is a growing frustration in the Pentagon among those who want to do more to help Ukraine, but find their views stymied by others who favor a more cautious approach. So obviously, it's not to say the Pentagon is all for giving everything. There are some in the Pentagon who are, some who aren't, and there's this internal struggle, as you would expect, given that it's probably there's somewhat of a cross section of people there, in the same way that amongst nations, people are split within nations as to exactly how to help Ukraine the best, whilst also keeping your own needs attended to. So in this case, that's the Pentagon making sure that the US defense is safe, that the tech that they've got is safe from Russian hands, etc., etc. This official said that while Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin and some of his senior staff were reluctant to approve the Abrams tanks, and weeks before that, the Advanced Patriot missile system, Biden eventually did so. What Ukraine needs is a game changer, and that's air power, said Deptula, the dean of the Mitchell Institute of Aerospace Power Studies. We have to stop asking what will happen if we provide air power and start asking what will happen if we don't. If the Biden administration had begun training experienced Ukrainian pilots how to fly the F 16 last year, they would be using it in combat already, Deptula assessed. He estimated that a fighter pilot with training on other aircraft could learn how to operate the platform within a few months. So on and so forth. Sticking to air stuff, Germany will deliver 105 vector drones from Quantum Systems to Ukraine. That's obviously very good. Excellent. Although someone below says, why Germany? Ukraine ordered this. When I buy a Belgian chocolate from a store, it wasn't Belgium. So the question is this actually just Ukraine buying this from the Germans, or is it the German government giving these or donating them or aiding them, whatever, to Ukraine? I don't know. We shall find out. I'm sure I could find out if I really looked. Breaking: US readying $2.2 billion weapons package for Ukraine that includes longer range rockets for the first time, according to two US officials. And this is coming from Reuters. So the quote from Reuters looks like the here. So one of the officials said that a portion of the package, $1.725 billion, would come from a fund known as the Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative, which allows President Joe Biden's administration to get weapons from industry rather than from existing US weapons stocks. The USAI funds would go toward the purchase of a new weapon, ground-launched small diameter bomb, GLSDB, which I talked about at length previously, which have a range of 94 miles or 150 kilometers. The United States has rebuffed requests for the 185-mile or 297 kilometer range ATACMS missile. The longer range of the GLSDB guide bomb could allow Ukraine to hit valuable military targets that have been out of reach and help it continue pressing its counterattacks by disrupting Russia further behind its lines. Reuters first reported on Boeing Company's proposal to field GLSDB for Ukraine in November. And, November to now, why is it taking so long, etc., etc.? They could have had these, but actually, these are coming from the USAI, which means that they have to be manufactured. They're not coming from stocks. And some are saying this could mean that it might be now 2024 before you see these munitions in the Ukrainian hands. Other people are saying, well, actually, Boeing possibly be making these irrespective of whether they were going to get the go ahead, predicting that they were going to get the go ahead, and there might already be some stock of these having been made. It just, I don't know, but it's just frustrating when they say no, 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 yes, and all the time they're saying no. Those could have been on the front line, and we could be further along in this war, closer to have it ending. This would be the range of those munitions, as you can see, pretty much everywhere in Ukraine, and some amount of Crimea as well. You'd be able to hit the bridges going into Crimea and Jankoy. I mean, the issue with hitting the bridges is if you want to then try and occupy Crimea, you can't really get in very well, or hit these sort of logistics parts, sorry, and then the bridge in Kerch. I think that bridge in Kerch is much more of a natural target because if Ukrainians took Crimea back, they wouldn't necessarily need to get into Russia. That was a new bridge anyway. That was one of Putin's darling projects, I guess. And yeah, so they can take that out, but actually taking routes into Crimea out permanently, or at least, not permanently, but um, considerably would hamper any movement into Crimea, and they need to think about that. They obviously think about this quite a lot, which is why they aren't hitting certain bridges hugely. So there's this bridge near Tokmak, or between Tokmak and Melitopol, where the Ukrainians, I think, hit recently, and the idea is that they didn't completely take it out, and it was being repaired at the time, as according to some, and it got hit again, which is to say, right, we're going to just keep hitting it so you can't use it, but you could fix it over time. It's not completely done over, like the Kerch Bridge is taking a long time to fix because that's fundamentally broken. If we just break these bridges enough, then if we were to um, take back this territory, then we could rebuild those bridges with relative ease. Okay, Poland wants to train Ukrainian Leopard 2. By the way, that's really exciting about these munitions being sent. It's really great news. About time. Just how quickly can they get to the front line? Poland wants to train Ukrainian Leopard 2 tanks crews in 5 weeks, according to Reuters. Quote, if we intensify training by increasing the number of instructors, optimize our time and our weekends, we can train a whole crew in 5 weeks, which is really shaving the time off what had previously been thought, and how long it would take to train these crews. So that's fantastic. It's about getting them up to spec first, I guess, and then getting at the same time as getting the crews trained and then getting them on them. Ukrainian partisans claim to have eliminated 2 high-ranking FSB officers on the road between Simferopol and Sevastopol in Crimea. So just to let you know, that is on that road. Yeah, there is no safe place for the Russians. That would obviously be a bit of a blow for the FSB, high-ranking FSB officers. So yeah, partisans are active, and in this case in Crimea as well, where we haven't seen so much partisan activity. To be honest, we've seen partisan activity in a number of places. Melitopol sort of area. We see, more around the Zaporizhia and Kherson oblasts. A little bit up in sort of Luhansk area. And then, now we're seeing it in Crimea, so that's good news. And finally, this comes from Ukrainska Pravda. The law enforcement raids a house of a powerful oligarch, Kolomoisky. The Dnipro-based oligarch who was present at the raid is allegedly accused of evading customs payments in enormous amounts and embezzling oil products worth $1 million. Now, this is good news. Ukraine needs to keep striving towards greater transparency, less corruption. They've moved somewhat on the corruption perception index, but that's a continued project, isn't it? And they have an awful lot of work to do to eradicate corruption and make Ukraine as transparent as possible. And that will then help them to get into the EU, as we know they want to. Yeah, that is, some might see that as bad news, as representing the fact that there is widespread corruption in Ukraine, and that is true, and there is, but also that they are doing something about it and taking out these very powerful people. I'm halfway through reading John Sweeney's Killer in the Kremlin, which is a sort of biography of sorts about Vladimir Putin, and oh my goodness, Putin! Wow, fascinating insights into Putin. And I had someone hitting me yesterday with Scott Ritter, a talk that he gave, and I watched the talk, and my goodness, Scott Ritter is. I don't know whether he's been paid by the FSB or by Russian entities, but he seems to have some kind of love affair with Putin, and you couldn't be less accurate in your personal evaluation of someone. He says he genuinely thinks he's one of the most honest politicians. It's like, do you know what he did in St. Petersburg? Do you know how he's got to be the richest person in the world? Like, do you know his 7 daughters that suddenly got billions of dollars? Where's that money come from? How have they earned it? Oh, that's corruption. I mean, the guy, it's utter supreme corruption, and the stuff to do with um, Chechnya and the Chechen wars, and all the terrible things. Oh my goodness! So, like, you can have people like Scott Ritter will come out with opinions about US imperialism, which do hit on some correct notes, by the way. So there are elements that where you're like, yeah, I can see what you're saying there. And then it's like, oh wow, your evaluation of that is so drastically wrong that that is hard to take you seriously. Like all the maybe good points you do make are completely drowned out by the terrible evaluations you're making elsewhere. Anyway, that's just my rant about Scott Ritter. I might do a video on him. But yes, anyway, there's the news for today. It's the second, 1st of February. Check out my Frontline update in a little while. And in the meantime, thank you for all your support. Please like, subscribe, and share.